Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks a lot to all the speakers to accept to participate in this webinar with the title Addressing Climate Change in a Post-COVID World. Before to begin, I would give you some practical information for the participant. After all the presentation, all the participants can write their questions for the speakers. But if we will receive many questions, we will try to answer after the webinar into the chat area dedicated into the Remtech platform called Alfredo's Cafe. The title of this webinar is quite ambitious. We would like to discuss together how we can improve our economic and environmental resiliency after the lessons of the coronavirus crisis. Given the scope and magnitude of the COVID crisis and the long shadow it will cast, can the community afford to pay attention to climate change and the broader sustainability agenda at this time? This is our big question. Our firm belief is that we cannot afford to do otherwise. Not only does climate action remain critical over the next decade, but investment in climate resilience infrastructure and the transition to a low carbon future can must drive significant near-term job creation while increasing economic and environmental resiliency. We will try to deal with these arguments with all our panelists. Before this, we will start our webinar with an update on the climate change emergency at European and global level with Mr. Sergio Castellari of the European Environmental Agency. We know that the climate change can contribute to pandemic. Rising temperature can create a favorable condition for the spread of certain infections, for example, mosquito-borne diseases such as malaria or dengue fever, while disappearing habitats may force various animal species to migrate, increasing to chance to spill over pathogens between them. We believe all actors, individual companies, governments, civil society, will have an important role in the increasing the economic and environmental resiliency, as that is fundamental learn from each other and to exchange experience to all government levels. For this reason, Emilia-Romagna region with Remtech and climate scientific committee, we will deepen the experience of will be presented during this webinar. In particular, the Milan cities with Mr. Pellizzaro, the South Africa with Mr. Troyes for waste management, and also Indian experience with Mr. Mangotra on energy policies in connection with the climate change emergency. Again, crucial and excellent strategies are also implemented by the Under 2 Coalition through the Under 2 Secretariat. The Under 2 Coalition is the most relevant network at global level, launched in 2015 at the same time of the Paris Agreement, which include over 220 subnational governments. Emilia-Romagna region is proud to be part of this coalition, and today we have the General Director, Mr. Tim Ashby of the Under 2 Secretariat, which will show all the projects that we are implemented at the global level to reach the carbon neutrality and push the national sub-government actions. In addition to that, we know that the European Commission is making a big effort into the Green New Deal. One of the last speech of the European Commission President, Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen, specified that the European Commission is revising the target of CO2 emission at 2030. New target, for example, could be the proposal could be 55%. At the same time, many funding programs will be modified to increase the financing for the research innovation in mitigation and adaptation. This webinar will be also the occasion to explore the European research policies and funding program for climate adaptation project with Mr. Misiak, expert member of the European Commission Mission Board on Climate Adaptation and Societal Transformation. We will close this webinar with the conclusion of the Emilia-Romagna Vice President and leash line of the regional effort for the climate change. I don't want to take time from the speakers. Thanks again to all the panelists, and I give the floor to Mr. Sergio Castellari for his intervention. Please.
Thanks a lot, Patricia. I thanks to the regional authority to invite me to this session. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, just a second.
Perfect.
Okay, so can you hear me? Yes?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, sure.
So thanks a lot to Patricia, to the regional authority of Emilia-Romagna, my region. I work in Copenhagen. My name is Sergio Castellari. I'm an expert on climate change, impacts, vulnerability, adaptation, and I work at the European Environment Agency. Originally, I'm from Bologna, and I used to work at the Istituto Nazionale of Geophysics and Volcanology, INGV, in Bologna. So today I will try to address some emergency of climate change. First of all, let me say what we're doing at the EA. The EA is an agency of the European Union. We work at the interface between science and policy. We provide support to the policymaker through assessment report, through platform, and we provide also data. And we coordinate a unique network on environment, climate, biodiversity, energy, which include 800 experts from 39 countries of the larger Europe, over 400 national institutions. My presentation, which will last only 15 minutes, we will try to address the climate change crisis at the global, but we're going to focus mainly at the Europe, since we are in Europe. I will outline some key impacts of climate change in Europe. I will try to extract some lessons learned, what we learned from the COVID-19 pandemic, a new solution, and I will draw some conclusions. We all know we are through a climate change crisis, which is at the global level. The climate change started to be really affecting our society in the last 50, 60 years, due, as we know, from the increasing of emission of greenhouse gases, which is providing a very rapid rise of CO2 concentration. We know that we are melting the sea ice and the continental ice in the Arctic and Antarctica. The biodiversity also connected to the climate change. We are losing biodiversity. We are degrading our ecosystem. The air temperature, the sea temperature are warming, and also the sea are rising and turning more acidic. So the pH is going down. And as we know, the last year, 2019, was the second hottest year on the record after 2016. And most of the last years are among the warmest year of all the meteorological record in the last 150 years. So, as a scientist, we have a duty to warning the society, to warning the common people, because we have a real moral, ethical duty to try to tell the things where we are going with our climate change, and what we are going to do as a society to address this challenge. So this is a paper just published in January this year, where 11,000 scientists have been signing this warning on a climate emergency. And so in this paper, they clearly say that the planet Earth is facing a climate emergency. The concept of climate emergency also has been already used as a legal way from some country. They've been stating and endorsing this concept of climate emergency for their country. We are going through, as a society, 3 global, interlinked, connected challenges. Climate change, but climate change is also linked to biodiversity loss, but also is linked to the unsustainable use of resources. All these 3 challenges, they need to be addressed all together. So we need to try to have a systemic change in our society in order to address all together these 3 global challenges. The window for action is closing. We don't have too much time. We need really urgent action to avoid irreversible change in our ecosystem, for example. So climate change, biodiversity loss, unsustainable use of resources are systemic challenge. So we need a systemic change. Now, what is going on in Europe? Europe, as any other part of the planet Earth, is experiencing strong impacts in some part, mild impacts in some other part, but the situation is getting worse if no action is going to be taken. Here we show the difference between the wet and the dry region of the South Europe, the wet region of the North. And as you can see, in the next decade, if nothing will be done, we're going to have a strong increase of this change of precipitation through North and South of Europe. The droughts also are increasing south of Europe. This is the last 60 years, and you can see that the intensity and the frequency of the droughts are larger in south of Europe. For example, in our country, in Italy, and in Spain, in south of France, in Greece. The European Sea, all the European Sea, they are following the global signal. And we have sea level rise temperature, we have the sea surface temperature warming up, all the European Sea are warming, and all the European Sea are also getting more acidic. The pH is going down. Maybe we remember the last strong heat wave of 2003. You should remember this heat wave impacted all the Western European countries. We had in Europe 75,000 deaths for this heat wave. There was a strong impact on ecosystem, on agriculture, forestry sector, on the tourism, on the city. So this, in the last decade, two decades, we only had 2 extreme heat waves of this intensity, one in 2003 and one in 2010, which was more located in the Eastern European part of Europe. With climate change going on and doing nothing as mitigation and adaptation, this kind of extreme, strong heat waves by the half of the century will be more frequent. We're going to have one of them every decade. And if still we do nothing or we do too little, by the end of the century, this heat wave will be extremely frequent. We're going to have one of them every 2-3 years. Having a strong and intense heat wave like the 2003-2010 every couple of years will provoke stronger impact on our society, in our infrastructure, in our urban settlement, in our economic, socio-economic sector. The heavy rain projection. So here we see the future of the possible extreme event in precipitation. As you can see, if we concentrate by the end of the century in the summer, we see that most of this extreme event can take place in Northeast Europe, in part of the South Europe. And about the forest fire. We all know what happened this summer in California, devastating forest fire. Thousands of people were moved out from their home. A big disaster for the ecosystem in all California. What's going on in Europe? We don't have actually good news also for Europe. As we know, South Europe is undergoing with very high risk of forest fire. This is the baseline of the last 30 years. With climate change, the high risk will move north. And so even the Central Europe and the South Scandinavia will shift from low risk of forest fire to medium and high risk. And here I recall the last forest fire in the last summers in the south of Sweden, close to Malmo. And this is basically is already taking place. So what the scenario were foreseen is already, we are already living through in the last years. Disasters. When we have extreme events, we can have disasters if we have a low vulnerability. We have a high vulnerability and low resilience in our society. And here at the EA, with the help of the NetCat service data of Munich Re and the Eurostat, we try to assess the fatalities and the total direct economic loss from the extreme events, from all the extreme events related to geophysical, meteorological, hydrological, climatological, in all the European countries in the last more or less 40 years. As you can see, in this almost 40 years, we had in all over big Europe around more than 100,000 fatalities. And we lost, as a direct consequence of the natural hazard, more than 450 billion of euro. What I like to recall here, that only 1/3 of this asset was insured, and most of this insured asset was in North Europe. And actually the natural disaster, especially the heat waves and the floods, is taking place more in the Central Europe and South Europe and the West and East Europe. So we really, this figure, what is really showing is the need to increase our coverage, our transfer of risks through insurance scheme. Now, what we learn from this new crisis which was from the COVID-19 in this year. So we are going through these three global challenges which require a systemic change. But now we are living through another sanitary crisis, COVID-19 pandemic. What we learn is that nature is doing better without us. I recall that in several parts of Europe, due to the lockdown, the full lockdown in 3 months, March, April, and May, in several countries, we had a reduction of the global air pollution, so an improvement of the air quality in the city. We had more wildlife returning to some areas where they were absent for decades. What we learned also from the COVID-19 is that we need more resilience in our society for this kind of crisis. And we need more prevention. So this resilience should be built more on prevention. Now, in order to address the COVID-19 challenge and the three global challenges which I've been highlighting before in my presentation, we need to move towards sustainability. This new challenge requires ambitious policy, supported from better knowledge. So we need to build a stronger interface between policy and knowledge and scientific community. Can you mute the microphone? I have a lot of noise in the background, please. At the European level, we have a solution. We started almost a year ago with a new commission. The president of the commission, Ms. von der Leyen, stated at the beginning of her mandate that she was going to launch a European Green Deal. And the European Green Deal is the priority #1 of this mandate of this new commission from 2019-2024. The European Green Deal just started. The European Green Deal is a roadmap of development, trying to join industrial development, socioeconomic development with environment, with biodiversity, ecosystem, with the resilience to climate.
Sergio, sorry, we cannot see your presentation.
I don't know, actually, I also had a lot of noise in the background, which
yes,
was very annoying.
I know there was some people.
Yeah, I don't know what's happened. Yeah, let me see.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I lost the sharing screen. I don't know why. Okay, can you see now?
Yes, it's fine now.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Okay, so at the European level, we started 1 year ago the European Green Deal. European Green Deal is a package, it's a roadmap, trying really to introduce a systemic change in our society. And we try really to address the three challenges which I've been showing at the beginning of my presentation: the climate change challenge, the biodiversity loss challenge, and the unsustainable use of resource challenge. First, we are going to try to become the first continent in the planet to be climate neutral and resilient. We already have been launching as a European Union the biodiversity strategy in this year, the new circular economy action plan. Now we're going to have the zero pollution strategy. We already have the farm to fork strategy. And we are going to arrive next year in February to launch the new adaptation strategy. And so all this will bring to an update of the directives and regulation of the European Union and to create also new directives. And we're going to be toward a new industrial strategy, which will be sustainable in all the sectors. I also like to recall the EU Recovery Fund, which has been made available from the European Union to the country which have been strongly impacted, like our country, Italy, from COVID-19. And the EU Recovery Fund, they've been tailored, they've been set up in order to start an ecological transition in the country. So they need to be spent for digitalization and for transition to ecology. This century is a very important century for us. As I said before, we are going through very global and strong challenge. We have solution. We have to introduce a systemic change in our society, which will take years, but at the European level, we already started to do that. So this can be really a century of change in our society, and we can be a model for the rest of the planet in the way to address this big challenge. So which are the conclusions I like to draw from this presentation? The three crises need to be interlinked. They need to have a connected, integrated approach. The climate emergency concept has been a warning for the scientific community in the last years from many scientists, and some countries that start to endorse this concept of climate emergency. All Europe is affected with different kind of impacts from north to south from climate change. COVID-19 crisis gave us some lesson learned, which we can use for fighting this global crisis. Natural prevention, more resilience, more prevention. Climate change is a systemic challenge, so we need a systemic change in our society. In Europe, we started a new roadmap, the EU Green Deal, which is a systemic transformation towards sustainability. I'd like to thank for the attention, all the audience, and you can get in contact with me by email through the European Environment Agency or by mobile, which is now here in this slide. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Sergio. Sorry for the noise under your voice and your presentation. I ask to all the participants to close, to switch off the microphone. And now we continue with the European Commission policies and action in general. And I give the floor to Mr. Jaroslav Misiak from the Centro Europeo Mediterraneo sui cambiamenti climatici, and also a member of the Mission Board on Climate Adaptation, the Societal Transformation of European Commission and Horizon Europe. Thank you so much, Jaroslav.
Thank you very much, Patrizia, and thank you for everybody being here. I think somebody is waiting to be admitted. I just noticed that among the participants. So my name is Jaro Misiak. I'm working at Euro-Mediterranean Center on Climate Change, and I will be briefly talking about the new initiative on mission-oriented research and innovation that was launched as a part of Horizon Europe, the next European Research and Innovation Framework Program. And I will briefly share also experience as an active scientist from what we're doing in order to design adaptation. So you might have heard that the Horizon Europe will contain one very important part of research and innovation, which is called mission-oriented research and innovation. This is based on pioneering work of Matsukato, who suggested back in 2018 to the European Commission to launch a very ambitious program that have a certain mission, have a very ambitious and bold goal, and are traceable. And this program should be a vehicle to engage citizens and communities throughout Europe in addressing very important societal challenges. So European Commission last year in 2019 established 5 boards on cancer, soil, oceans, cities, and on climate adaptation and societal transformation. So I will speak a little bit about what we have suggested, what we have put into our recommendation in this report. All 5 mission board reports have been handed over to the European Commission this morning as a part of European Research and Innovation Days. So there was morning ceremony of handing over the final reports. This afternoon, if you still have time and if you would like to join us at 5 o'clock, there will be a session dedicated especially to the climate adaptation and societal transformation. And it's featuring a very interesting speaker, including the chair of the board, who is the Connie Hedegaard, whom you remember as the European Commissioner for Climate Change. I acted as a rapporteur of this board, and I'm happy to show you what we came up with. So this report is already available. You can download it from here. And the mission is about, climate resilient Europe, preparing Europe for climate disruptions, and accelerating the transformation to a climate resilient and just Europe. So our mission has the overarching vision of turning the challenge of adapting to climate change into an opportunity to make Europe more resilient, climate prepared and just. And here on the figure you see almost all members of the mission board adaptation. Now, as a part of our recommendation, we have suggested 3 main objectives. And the first is prepare Europe for climate disruption, from which all citizen communities and regions should benefit. The second objective is accelerate transition to a resilient future. That means,
sorry, Yaro, we can see only the first slide, the first page of your presentation. I don't know if you
okay,
move.
I will restart the.
Thank you.
I will restart the. Okay, yeah. Can you confirm? Did you see my slide now?
Yes, now it's okay.
Okay, excellent. Do you see it as a full screen, or do you see also anticipation of the next slide?
We will see also the anticipation.
Okay. What about now?
Full screen.
Excellent. Thank you. So the second objective is to accelerate the transition to climate resilience. And for this objective, we suggest working closely with 200 communities and regions and help them to design the vision, the transformative vision, as well as pathway, and sign a resilience contract as an expression of the full commitment on the side of public administrations, but also societal partners. And finally, working closely with 100 regions or communities, we will delve into in-depth demonstrators. So in those 100 regions, we will fuel and help to raise additional funds and help to implement the transformative pathways that have been designed as a part of the second objective. So the other way how to look at our objective is this. So Prepare Europe is basically to give tangible benefits to all European citizens and every community. And that includes easy access to climate knowledge, encouraging to adopt risk management plans and make social infrastructure safe and accessible. So this is the Prepare Europe. It's basically a response to the COVID as a response to the COVID. For climate-induced disruption, we should not be caught unprepared, and we should really invest and in very short time get ready for facing a similar disruption caused by extreme climate events. The second objective is working with regions and communities across region. This is what you can see on the map. The red dots are randomly chosen. So there will be a thorough process of choosing the communities and regions to work with. And those regions will undergo a in-depth work, looking into adopting a vision, context and place-specific vision, transformative vision, and pathway, how to get to the future that has been envisaged. And finally, the deep demonstrator of climate resilience will implement the measures, the plans, and the actionable solutions that have been identified under the objective 2 in order to demonstrate a cross-border value in Europe and upscale the insider knowledge that have been gained. So this is about objective and how we got there. So we have designed 5 key community systems in our recommendation and enabling condition that need to be tackled as a part of the innovation. So the innovation is both innovation within and across the 5 community system enabling conditions. The community system include community and social infrastructure, human health and well-being, nature and biodiversity, water management at the community level, and rural and urban landscapes and sustainable food systems. And the enabling condition include data knowledge, digital services, inclusive and deliberative governance, local economies and resources, communication education, and mobilizing additional funds and finances, including the finance from European structural and investment funds. So those are the components of innovations, if you want. And the way how we imagine these working is like this gear, right? So it's not about addressing any single community system alone. It's really to identify the innovation that goes across the community systems and enabling conditions, and set off a series of effect that bring in a significant innovation in terms of organization, social innovation, economic innovation, environmental innovation, and whatever innovation for social change. So very quickly, so 3 objectives to prepare Europe. We will work with communities across Europe for better understanding of climate risk exposure and adoption of climate management plans. And that include a massive improvement of the availability and accessibility and usability of climate risk knowledge, access to climate risk assessments, and adjustment of existing early warning systems, and as well as training assistance and rigorous monitoring and evaluation of the progress made. Accelerate transition means designing vision and objective for transformative change, co-creating adaptation pathways, and co-designing actionable solutions. And the objective is that by 2030, those 200 European communities will have adopted the vision and described the adaptive pathway and signed the resilience contract. And finally, the Build Deep Resilience is about 100 deep demonstrators that have scaled up actionable solution and triggered transformative societal transformation while building deeper resilience. The mission will place more emphasis on impact at scale, upscaling the solution designed in local circumstances, and creating cross-border value. That means, the European cross-border value, building resilience across Europe. So this is in brief what the mission on climate adaptation and societal transformation is about. There will be a call next year. The overall budget is about €1 billion that will be invested in project that will feed into the mission and eventually enable to achieve the goal. So this is a very significant initiative of European Commission, European Union, within the context of Horizon Europe, but really going beyond research and innovation. It's really touching upon almost every single policy that it's touch upon climate adaptation strategy. So it's really allowed the missions are on the interface between innovation and the policy for more resilience in Europe. So these are the members of the mission board. The chair is Connie Hedegaard, as I mentioned, and here are all members of the board listed. You will find more information in the report that I showed before. Very briefly, just within a couple of minutes, I'd like to explain Europe has been working already on similar concept before. And this is European Union has invested more than 100 million euros into making climate services tailor-made and accessible for specific user, and using the climate services as a mean for triggering societal transformation. Clara is one of those projects that have been funded under Horizon 2020. There have been several more. I just wanted to flesh out, as Clara is drawing to the end, and it might be of your interest to look into what we have produced. So we have developed 14 or 15 climate services, and each climate service is accompanied by value assessment, what this service is providing for specific users, as well as sustainable innovation plan. Now, wave of working was building upon co-design and co-evaluation of climate services. So we have established a multi-user forum that included more than 70 people across Europe, and invited them to join us for a workshop that lasted for 3 workshops, each lasting for 2 days. And during those workshops, we worked very intensively together on looking at the prototype, looking into values unleashed by the climate services, and the business model under which the service might be operational. So this exercise has basically ended up developing 15 climate services, developing the use cases and strong case for using climate services for local or regional decision and policy making, has fueled the co-design and co-evaluation, as well as the marketability and the business model. All this information can be found on our website, clara/project EU, or you can learn about this project from Twitter or from Facebook, or just dropping me an email. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm more than happy to answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yaro, for your presentation. Very interesting. And stay with us if we follow all the other speakers, and if we receive a question about your presentation. And now we move to a global level with the presentation of Tim Ashvier from the Climate Group, and also the Under2 Secretariat, General Director, for an overview of the activity of the Under2 Coalition Association Network, and all the action to push the region in the correct way for the climate action. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank the region of Emilia-Romagna for inviting me here today to contribute to this webinar on addressing climate change in a post-COVID world. In the first week, or in the week of the first digital edition of the RemTech Expo. We at the Climate Group moved our largest event online this week, Climate Week New York. It's actually happening at the same time as this. We can well appreciate the challenge of hosting a major event virtually for the first time. So congratulations for today. I want to cover 4 topics today. Firstly, I think it'd probably be useful for me to introduce the Climate Group. I'm conscious some of you will know us, others probably less so, and to explain how we work, our work with businesses, a broader context, and then to focus in on our work with states and regions. As Patricia described, I'm the director of the Under2 Secretariat based at the Climate Group, and I will explain a little bit around how we work with states and regions through the Under2 Coalition, and then focus in on the question of how we've been considering and supporting a global and regional green recovery. So just to introduce the Climate Group, our mission is to drive climate action fast. We're in a hurry, there's a climate emergency going on. And we want to achieve a world of net zero carbon emissions by 2050, greater prosperity for all. As the speakers have already been talking before, this issue of the just transition absolutely central to our thinking. So how do we do it? Well, we want to make it happen by convincing, challenging, and helping organizations to make commitments and then turn them into action. I'll describe some of those shortly. But we then multiply it. We build and run networks. That's what we're about, bringing together coalitions of like-minded, ambitious climate actors. And we join up organizations to unlock the power of collective action that shares the same ambitions and shares influence and creates influence. And then we shout about it. So I referred just now about Climate Week New York, but the Climate Group has always had a very strong belief in the strategic importance of communication. So we share what we achieve together to show more organizations what they too could do. So to give you a little bit of a sense of how that might work in the corporate sector, I'll talk about our work with global companies. So our business actions team is focused on three of the most significant aspects of the energy transition: renewable energy, energy productivity, and electric vehicles. We're also increasingly working on heavy industry decarbonisation. Well, how do we do it? Well, we work with companies, some of the biggest companies in the world, to create demand side and signals for the products that we believe could really shift the green economy to get us towards the 21st century low carbon economy. We're talking about the use of clean and renewable energy through our RE100 campaign, the adoption of electrification of transport, energy productivity in buildings and homes. And to give you a sense of, well, what's the reach of that? Who have we managed to bring in? Now, I think the chap who runs RE100 said that this slide mainly exhibits that we need a new slide. But this gives you some sort of indication of the global companies that have signed up to the campaigns that we're talking about. And so RE100, if it was a country in its own right, would be one of the top 20. Would have the carbon footprint of the top 20 countries in the world. And that is what we're trying to address by moving them en masse to renewable energy. So we work with states and regions, and hence our strong bond and friendship with the region of Emilia-Romagna. The vehicle that we do that through is the Under2 Coalition, and Patricia described early on around how we've been around since 2015. It's a global community committed to the goals of the Paris Agreement that are set out in that first paragraph. 220 governments representing 1.3 billion people, 43% of the global economy. And all of the individual states and regions who join the Under2 Coalition sign a memorandum of understanding. Now, this Under2 memorandum of understanding, the MOU, commits them at the head of the regional state level to deliver on the Paris goals, to commit their jurisdiction to a world of under 2 degrees warming and under 2 tons of carbon per capita. Now, that was the target that we achieved in 2015. We're now looking in the build up to the Glasgow COP around moving towards net zero. And I'll talk a little bit more as we finish up on that. So who runs this thing? Who are these people? Well, this slide gives you a little bit of an indication of our governance. Our governance is through our co-chairs. We have 4 co-chairs at the moment for Africa, Europe, Latin America, and North America. We currently need to fill our co-chair for Europe, for Asia, but you'll see there that the European co-chair, interestingly, is the government of Scotland, which the eagle-eyed of you will note is not a state or region, but actually a devolved administration within the UK. And a very important signal that the Scottish Government wanted to send by taking that position over around their ongoing and enduring commitment to the European climate goals that were set out by Sergio and Yaroslav as well. And you'll see that I have a steering group that advises me in the governance of the Under2 Coalition, which features Emilia-Romagna in it as well. And we often will get input from Patricia and from Ellie Schlein, who we'll hear from before the end of the session. Well, how does it work? Very practically. So we have pathways that we ask governments. And Paris says that they created the concept of the 2050 pathways, setting out a long-term greenhouse gas emission reduction goal to get to 2050, and what might be the intermediate milestones to get you there. So the governments sign up to doing that. We then ask governments to cooperate through peer learning on policy actions and sharing through different regions, different parts of the world, what it is that they have done, what has worked effectively for them. We have a very strong commitment to transparency. We support governments to strengthen their greenhouse gas accounting capacity, and we also produce an annual disclosure each year on the progress. So to give a little bit more texture as to, well, what is that I'm talking about? On the Pathways project, this is a project team that was working in Colombia last year, which is working with governments in Argentina, Brazil, Mexico and Peru to reduce emissions from a range of sectors, but particularly given the context in which they're working, a focus on the AFOLU sector, agriculture, forestry, land use, and focus on forest conservation. We work with a smaller group of states that are listed there before looking to explode out that learning, and we're currently in a phase of multiplying the learning of that through 27 different Latin American states to look at how they might address decarbonisation pathways, addressing deforestation in the context in which they live and operate. We have here our policy actions. There are on the right hand side of the slides, and when these are circulated you can read this in a little bit more detail, the descriptions of policy work that we've been doing around industry transition, around zero emission vehicles, around addressing short-lived climate pollutants, methane in particular, and also new work that we've been starting off on climate finance as well, and how to access climate finance at the subnational level. And as I mentioned before, our strong commitment to transparency, and as I described, the annual disclosure process that we produce, which will complete in November. Really exciting kind of process, that, because I'm so proud of people. So actually we've got 109 state and regional governments have completed our 2020 disclosure, even though that process actually only started after COVID-19 exploded into the world, and yet people are still being able to prioritize the work in order to be able to deliver that disclosure. And that's really important because more than anything else, the key point around the transparency is that we have to hold ourselves to account. One of the things that we've been credited with as the Under2 Coalition is being the international climate initiative with the greatest potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So we are being looked to deliver against that. And so that's why transparency is so important to us. To talk around Under2 Coalition's actions on green recovery, I mean, what have we been doing? Well, of course, it's been the dominating feature of the year. We've been holding virtual dialogues, we've been developing resources, we've been developing public statements, and we're shortly to produce some reports from the Under2 Coalition, which starts to look at what states and regions can do in very practical terms to implement regional measures and policies that both benefit the economy and the climate. And to say a little bit more around that, well, RemTech obviously takes place this year as key decisions are being made on where and how to invest to recover from COVID-19 and relaunch economies around the world. As Sergio just described, ongoing events in California, but also Oregon, Washington, remind us that climate impacts continue to worsen. Our own Under2 Coalition meetings on COVID-19 that are referred to here really confirmed the common view that recovery planning must help the world come back from the crisis by preparing us for the future. It should be about redesigning systems, recovering better, building global resilience and regeneration. And despite this, we do know that so far twice as much recovery money for G20 governments has been spent on fossil fuels as clean energy. So a clear commitment to climate action is needed to shape broader investment flows coming out of the crisis. As the largest global coalition of states and regions, we're urging decision makers at all levels to set the world on a more resilient, sustainable path in responding to the global crisis. To achieve that, we expect the global community to place the goals of the Paris Agreement, the UN Sustainable Development Goals at the core of the economic recovery measures in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. Transitioning to a zero emission economy, committing to low carbon investment will ensure job creation, social justice, long-term health, well-being, citizens, natural ecosystems, as was just described, and building a society that's more resilient to future shocks. We firmly believe that there's not a trade-off with economic growth. We all know the economics. We wouldn't be in this meeting today if we didn't believe, as the new climate economy has shown us, that moving to a zero emission future can deliver economic benefits of 26 trillion through to 2030, creating 65 million new low carbon jobs, avoiding 700,000 premature deaths from air pollution, all in support of the Paris Agreement targets. And the economic benefits that have been modelled out by others have been thought to be as much as 127 to 616 trillion by the end of the century. So look, we're committed to working together. What we have said as a coalition is set out on this slide, is that we will embrace a vision for the coalition that's aligned to net zero global emissions. That's our next goal as we move forward into the 2020s. We're developing long-term plans. We're creating and designing and sharing best policy solutions. We're measuring and reporting honestly on our progress. And most importantly, we're building our collective voice to support green and just recovery for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you so much. Okay. Now we move from a global experience and global action to the national very excellent activities from one of our main city in Italy to have a big effort for the climate change and also to increase the adaptation and the resiliency in general. So I give the floor to Piero Pellizzaro from Milan municipality. He is a Milan Chief Resilient Officer and also Global Resilient City Network. Thank you, Piero.
Thank you very much, and thanks a lot for the invitation.
Yeah.
Just please.
Yes, full screen. Thank you so much. Okay.
Can you see moving the screen as well?
Yes, it's fine.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you very much for the invitation. As Patrizia said, I'm the Chief Resilience Officer of the City of Milan. I'm as well we are also member of the Global Resilient Cities Network, or since yesterday, the Resilient Cities Network. Before pioneered by the Rockefeller Foundation, now funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. As the Global Resilient Cities Network, I'm also playing as a member of the Global Steering Committee, and so that's where we stand at the moment. What about our last few months? That's for cities government, as for the other government, was a challenging situation due to the COVID. Something that could be interesting to share with all of you was when we started designing our resilience strategy was the spring 2018. We started analyzing, we were asking to our stakeholder about their perception about shock and stress. And pandemia, whenever happened, was considered even not as a stress or a shock by the communities on the global scale. But on the other end, when we look at climate change, what's interesting, that heat waves and climate change were considered as a stress, not as a shock. So it's meaning that the population has a different kind of perception of the risk that the city could lead. Pandemia is not considered, and climate change on heat waves and are more, let's say now they're perceiving as a stress, so something that is normal to happen. It doesn't mean that they're going to take action on climate change, everything, when you look at adaptation to that, because even if you perceive that there is something is common, the increase of the temperature, they still may be using the car, they're still doing other kind of things. So believe it or not, that's still where we stand. When we work on Milan 2020, I decided to present our adaptation strategy. The adaptation strategy was not the adaptation to climate change strategy. Was the name we decided to have for the post-lockdown strategy in the cities. Because I think there is something in common between the COVID and the climate change, that we need to adapt to a new way of living, a new way of approaching the cities. And this doesn't mean that we are excluding, but maybe the integration of the new normality and climate change could happen. So when we start to analyzing the strategy for the phase 2, so the unlocking, and was April. So still when we were standing, we were still in the lockdown in Milan. At the end of April, we have launched a participatory process. So we have drafted a strategy for the unlock that started at the mid of May. The participatory process was open for more than a month, and almost at the beginning of June, and we received more than 3,900 proposals by all the communities, looking at the different kind of action, and we are going to see part of that. That is something interesting when you look at the lockdown and the climate, and you try to compare it to climate change. We had the lockdown, we have the post-lockdown, and now we are looking for the new ordinary. That is something that is happening when there is an extreme weather event or something. You have to stuck in the emergency, then you have the post-emergency, and then you believe that it happened a new ordinary, even at the time of climate change. You have to find a new way of living. The condition for recovery, how we keep some of these things, that there is something in common as well with climate change, was the mapping and the territory, that I think it's quite interesting, and the screening of the population. The screening in the sense that the needs and the issues of the population are facing. So the target of our adaptation strategy, we're considering 6 different kind of people based on health, so was positive or negative, the immunity, immune or not immune, age, young or old, sanitary condition with or without pathologies, work status, active or inactive, economic situation, vulnerable or not. Again, if you look at these categories, you can see a lot of similarity when you design adaptation to climate change plan. So when we look at the context of the mayor of Milan, it's a city, for the one that maybe never been Milan, it's 1.4 million people. It's relatively small cities because it's only 181 square kilometers of surface in the city. And I've seen an increase of the population of 40,000 people every year since last year. So the prediction is that we reach to have more than 500,000 population the next 10 years if everything is going. So when we look at the mission of this strategy, we have tried to understand how we can support our community, how we protect our community, vulnerable groups, elderly and children and teenagers, how to reduce bureaucracy, to maintain, so it's meaning how we can maintain a smart working high digitalization level, to reorganize the city, so the city timetables, street and public space, and rediscover the neighborhood dimension. If you look at the strategy of these kind of the pillars and the mission of this strategy, you can keep that smart working high digitalization levels is also an action that will lead to contribute to climate change in terms of reduction of emission, because you reduce the mobility in the city, as well you reduce the consumption in buildings. And the high digitalization level is meaning, give you an example what happened at the end, one on the concrete from the mission to the reality. Since June, for example, in the city of Milan, for maybe other countries, it's already something happened, but you can get your the birth certificate, your death certificate, all kind of certificate that is normally go to the city and to the municipality directly from a newspaper shop. So digitalization help us also to deliver services more into the district, in the city district. So it's meaning reducing the mobility of the population in the city, so helping and contributing to climate change. When we look at the organization, it's the city timetable, and so it's we are now designing the new time plan of the city. So when the shop should be open, when the logistics should deliver. This was done because we need to reduce the flow of the population, so to reduce the agglomeration of the population. So we are reviewing all the timetable. At the same time, we work on street and public space. And here I think it's the big challenge, what we can learn from the COVID that could also help us to contribute to climate change. One of the issues that we always discuss with Yaroslav, that we have a couple of programs together with Yaroslav, it's also heatwaves, you need to create more space, you need to create more shadow, you need to reduce the effect of heat island. And what happens during the COVID, that the population required to have more space to work, to space to keep the distance, And there is something that is an obstacle in the city: cars. Cars are not only one of the global emitters, but cars are also a source of heat and a source of parking. So cars also a way where they reduce the space of the population available. So we work on street and public space. I'm going to show you something. And then rediscover is the neighbor dimension. Working on the neighbor dimension. Sorry a second. Working on the neighbor dimension is also helping us to reduce the flow of goods and food and logistics within the city. So it's help us also to reduce the mobility. So there was 3 pillars. The pre-vision, adaptation, strategy, and sustainability was one of that. And the other one was governance, right, and inclusion, economy, resource and values, labor, sustainability, time, space, and services. So when we got to the action, and now we lead COVID and sustainability, there is always something that it's normally you usually said in the emergency management domain, that when an emergency comes, a shock happen, it's important what you do to react to the shock, but it's even more important what you have done before the emergency comes, because you have to be able to implement in a short time action that could answer to the point. So let me just keep some of this action that we have identified, and then I go to show you also what the citizens were asking. I think it's interesting for our conversation. The immediate action we take one was the smart working and the synchronization of the work timetables. So the smart working has been introduced for the public servant. You know, the city of Milan as government, together with utilities, we employ more than 30,000 people. So the first company in the city is Milan municipality. So when we decide to introduce the smart working, we have a high impact on all the city organization in terms of mobility, in terms of consumption. And so that smart working is also a big contribution since the beginning for climate change. On the other hand, we also work on the school timetables to decongest the mobility system. So to be flexible in the timetables is also another important step. Here, there is other 2 important elements that we have introduced. One is the car-free street in front of several schools. So closing the street when the school open, when the school closed. That is a practice that we want to follow. Was before introduced to keep more safe the pupils, but then it was also introduced by the environmental department before to introduce and to reduce the use of cars for the family, to push family taking pupils at school with the bike and on the bike by foot. One other action we are now, hopefully we are going to launch in a couple of weeks, is the play street. So again, in front of the street in the school, for the street that are rotating in front of the school, they're going to close the cars and make more space for pupils to play. And so it's also how we design the public space. Again, closing the street is removing cars, is making a more slow cities, because one of the goals of this strategy is to reach the concept of the 15-minute cities, so you can reach, except from the workspace, all your needs, essential needs, by walking 50 minutes. So the digitalization, the dimension of the neighbor is also helping us to design a new concept. Is the 15-minute city that has been launched in Paris by Ms. Hidalgo, and is now looking from different kind of other cities at global scales. One of the other was the mobility. The reaction from Milan was to instead, there is several cities governed by other kind of politicians. So from the right side, let's say, in Italy, they decided to open up the street in the city center. So instead, to reduce the number of cars after the COVID, they push and work on individual mobility using cars. That is, again, against climate change. We decided to improve our bike line. So we have designed 55 new kilometers of bike. The first 25 was delivered in May and June, and the next 10 is almost done. This is create a new system of biking. So you can basically go from Pavia, that is 30 kilometers south of Milan, to Lecco, that is close to Lago di Como, so Como Lake is the same, is one of the lake. You can go by bike. So we basically integrate the different system of bike lanes to react to the COVID emergency, and it gives us the opportunity to improve the bike system in the cities as a concept for climate change. So again, you can see how we can benefit from this situation. So the Strade Aperte is what you can see here is the 35 new kilometers, is extension of zone 30. So it's also, we have increased the number of streets under a limitation of speed of 60 kilometers, from 50 to 30 kilometers. We have increased the widening of the sidewalks. So we enlarged the sidewalks, and we have also introduced some temporary pedestrianization in the neighborhood. So we have created new pedestrian areas in the cities. Why? To create more space for bar restaurant. So, but this is also reduce the way of people moving by cars, and in terms of climate change is another positive impact. The other one is the open square, or the so-called Piazza Aperte. Piazza Aperte, Strade Aperte, both of this initiative was not something that we create for the COVID. It was something we already prepared, so we were ready to deliver in a short time because we have all the procedure and we have already planned to have it in the future. We just push some intervention and to make it in the shorter time as a reaction to that. As you can see, the Piazza Aperte is the picture on the right side. It's normally our space within the city that normally has been used for parking or using by cars. We recover the space. That is a tactical urbanism. So at the beginning, it's a temporary use. We use the trees. We put bench. We have the tennis table for different kind of use. We install bike sharing, and then you can see there is also light color as painted. The light color is help us also to reduce the temperature of the surface. So working on the tactical urbanism, working to bring back public space to people instead of cars, and working on inclusiveness, it's again is an action that help us to fight climate change in the long term, and then is also improving the equity, because since that last year, since the mayor Sara has decided to keep on his shoulder all the competencies of climate change and environment, so we don't have a deputy mayor for climate change and environment. It's the mayor itself, the deputy mayor for climate change and environment, is always asking us that for every euro invested in climate change, we should invest €1 in the social policy, or the €1 that you invest in climate change has to have at least a benefit of €1 on social equity. Why? Because we also need to avoid the so-called climate gentrification. We have seen a lot around in the lot of cities that there have been taken some pilot district in some of the cities at the global scale. That district were retrofit and using as a living lab to showcase technology for climate change. But at the end, we have great gentrification because maybe low income, then all this technology has pushed and rise the price of house, and that pushed the people to move from that side to another. I'm quoting this sort of negative impact of climate change adaptation, not as a criticizing, but something that we need collectively as scientists, as a practitioner, as a private company to avoid, because we need to take action on climate change, and we cannot, because of climate change, create gentrification. This is happening in Miami, it is happening in Copenhagen, it's happening in Venice. So we need to consider that some of this action has also impact. And so we are looking at this opportunity of the public space and the Strade Aperte and the Piazza Aperte as a way that we can also help the inclusiveness and try to keep the equity, because also slowing down the city in terms of mobility is helping to increase the equity among the community. So all these measures for us was a response to the COVID emergency, but as well has been a response for the future and for the real and the present. As Sergio was quoting before, the impact of climate change is well, under the eyes of everyone at the moment, not everyone actually. There's still some negationists around the globe, there are even president. But this kind of action for us, there was a win-win solution to try to give an answer to our community at the time of the COVID emergency, but at the same time to keep working on improving the comfort and the quality of the public space in the city. I think I've been using my 50 minutes time, and I will share with you the presentation. And I think there is only one last message I want to share. It's pretty clear that, as Sergio was sharing before, during the COVID, we have experienced the way the nature could come back, and the nature could flourish in a beautiful way because we are reducing our emission. When we say that reducing the emission is impossible, or changing our lifestyle is impossible, I think that is not true. Because we've seen how during the lockdown, we have seen people go to the supermarket by walking instead to use the cars, to share their needs and their goods in the district dimension, and also to reduce their consumption in general, because they can keep a better time. If you have more time for your life, you can get more time to respect the nature, and you improve the future of our planet. So I think that if we are capable to learn from this experience, we can really make the difference for the next years of fighting the climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Piero, and also thank you for your very, very interesting presentation. I have many questions, but I don't want to take time to the last speakers and panelists. But maybe if you have time, or in privately in the also Alfredo Cafe, I wanted to submit you some question for your activities, very unique in Italy. So we move to the two last technical presentation. I give the floor to Cristina Trois from a South African Research Chair in Waste and Climate Change Institution, and I ask her to show us what are the main policies on the management of waste in South Africa, connection with the climate change effort and action. Thank you, Cristina.
Okay, thank you. Let me share the screen.
Yeah.
Please, Patrizia, let me know if you can, what you can see.
Yes, a few minutes, a few seconds. A white box. Okay, now it's fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank REMTech. This morning we had a very interesting webinar on waste architecture that I had the pleasure to moderate, and this afternoon the session is equally interesting. So thank you very much for inviting me. I am an Italian national from Sardinia, but I've been working and living in South Africa for the past 22 years. So it's quite an interesting north-south connection. Right, so I come from the same, or I live in the same region of the co-chair of the climate group under 2 coalition, Zinhle Zikalala, which is the KwaZulu-Natal province of South Africa. In particular, I live in Durban. Now, Durban is the third largest city of South Africa, together with Johannesburg and Cape Town, has a population of about 3.5 million people in the inner city, and up to 5 million people across the hinterland. It's interesting that I come from Durban, because Durban is in the southern is under a subtropical climate belt, and therefore we experience extreme weather conditions, and in fact disastrous conditions due to climate change that have exacerbated in the past, I would say, 10 years. Now, today I would like to bring a different angle to the discussion about climate change, acknowledging the importance and influence of the waste sector, solid waste sector in particular, to climate change. Now, in South Africa, I would also like to acknowledge the supporters of this national chair, which are the Department of Science and Innovation, the National Research Foundation, and various other institutions, including SANEDI, which is the Department of Minerals and Energy. I also represent and chair the International Waste Working Group, the Southern African regional branch here in KZN. Now, we have clearly a global challenge, which is created by the amount of greenhouse gas emissions produced by different sectors. So if you look at this picture on the left-hand side, you can see that the food waste, so organic waste, and the biogenic waste that produces greenhouse gas, or the maximum contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, globally contributes to about 6.7% of global warming potential. In reality, however, this is misleading because each one of the major sectors, including electricity, agriculture, industry, and of course transportation, produces waste one way or another. Indeed, therefore, we should not consider only food waste as the major contributor. Now, in South Africa, we have a number of initiatives that at national level that look at the impact that the waste sector has on climate change. In particular, the Department of Science and Innovation a few years back has created the Research, Development and Innovation Waste Roadmap. And in fact, my research chair is an expression of this roadmap. The Department of Science and Innovation has identified the 6 main streams of the RDI waste roadmap. In particular, climate change features in the waste and environment stream, and others that are relevant to the discussions. In fact, I would say that all of the streams are very much connected. So as a result of the new focus that the South African government is now putting towards this nexus between waste and climate change, 2 research chairs have been created at national level. One is mine, the waste and climate change, and the second one is waste in society, to acknowledge the importance of societal change and behavioral change when it comes to implementing sustainable strategies for diversion of waste from landfills or for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere. With respect to the waste roadmap, and in particular my portfolio, we focus our attention on specific priority waste, which are, of course, municipal solid waste, waste plastics, tires, and organic waste. As they are, we are also opening up to textile waste and construction and demolition waste, as they are also important contributors towards climate change. Now, so what are at national level the main questions, and I would say the main focus areas that we are trying to answer as a center, but most importantly as a major advisor to the South African government with respect to the accomplishment of the NDCs and of course the SDGs that are related to climate change. First and foremost, where in the waste sector are we are generating greenhouse gas emissions? So quantification, I think one of the earlier speakers has pointed out the importance of a correct quantification of greenhouse gas emissions. Yes, it is important to use inventories or methodologies like suggested by the UNFCCC or the IPCC. But in our case, we are also trying or striving to look or to define indicators and define emission factors that are appropriate to our climate, to the in a way also our environmental conditions in the Southern African region or Sub-Saharan Africa. So we are not looking only at quantifying greenhouse gas emissions, but also at determining correct emission factors. The second question that also drives our work is what technology portfolio, what strategic pathways could achieve climate stabilization. So it is important, yes, to understand how much greenhouse gas emissions are determined, but the major hypothesis that we are trying to prove is that is not only just to measure greenhouse gas emissions. That's easy in a way, but is it possible by systematically applying waste strategy, so the best waste strategy, to create what we call a stabilization wedge for climate change? So it's important to understand what technologies, what strategies accomplish the maximum diversion of waste from landfill, and of course the maximum reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Said that, we also need to understand where geographically across in our case, the region of South Africa, or the country of South Africa, or the Southern African region, where geographically these technologies and these systems should be located. The third comprehensive question is, what is the best scenario for your country waste sector to achieve a low carbon economy, and what would be required for end of life technologies like waste collection systems, consumption, and so on. Now, said that, what is the context in which we operate? In South Africa, we produce over 100 million tons of waste is generated, of which 90% is still landfilled in landfill sites. So we only 10% approximately is recycled, and only 1% of that 10% is recycled in households. So we are very far away from the situation that all the achievements of the European Union. So we need to acknowledge that waste management in an emerging economy is a complex socio-technical challenge. We need to also cater, or our municipalities have to cater for highly urbanized environments, peri-urban environments that spill into completely energy poor, water scarce areas, rural areas, like in the right side of the picture. Now, so what is the situation with respect to food waste, which is our major culprit? 60% of the food waste in South Africa from municipal solid waste, and 100% of industrial biomass is still disposed on landfill sites. At national, at continental level, so in Africa, that percentage goes up to 57%. So 57% of the municipal solid waste is organic and is still dumped, often in illegal dumps. So this is a pictorial of what type of food waste we produce. It's self-explanatory, but most importantly, in quantifying the impact that the waste sector has on climate change, it's important to say that yes, we may have a very high collection rate, but from that collection rate, which is in our case 67% approximately, that collection rate, how much actually is recycled, how much is used to produce electricity, and so on. So that's the question. So with respect to the situation in South Africa, the waste sector in South Africa contributes to over 4%, almost now is actually almost 5% of greenhouse gas emissions and 37% of total methane emissions. Methane has increased by 11% over the years, and greenhouse gas emissions have increased almost 60% from the waste sector in the past 20 years. Now, doing a parallelism with what happened in Europe, in the same time frame, greenhouse gas emissions in the European Union have more than halved because of very targeted regulations, particularly related to diversion of waste from landfill sites and separated collection. Now, methane from landfills represents 12% of total global emissions, methane emissions in the world. So it's actually, again, landfills are another important contributor towards climate change. The emissions in South Africa equate to about 9 million tons of CO2 equivalent in 2016. With respect to waste, as I said, 90% of our waste is disposed into landfill site. Only 10% of the waste in South Africa is recycled, and approximately 65% of our organic and biogenic waste, which equates approximately to 31 million tons of municipal organic waste, is municipal organic waste, and 100% of industrial biomass is still disposed in landfill site. With a massive waste, excuse the pen, massive waste of resources. Now, South Africa has adhered to the waste hierarchy, whereby we are trying to move up from disposal into landfill to more favorable waste disposal, waste treatment facilities like energy recovery, recycling, reuse, and of course reduce. However, we are still far away from achieving steps 3 and 3 to 1 of the waste hierarchy. We are actually entering into an era, even if we are still currently in lockdown, and we are still in level 2 lockdown. So the past 6 months of COVID pandemic have in a way retarded certain application of certain processes or projects across the country, with particular respect to energy recovery and anaerobic digestion. But however, they have not slowed down the legislative machine. And in fact, I am very happy to say that a few days ago, we had the information that the Department of Environmental Affairs and Forestry have promulgated a new emission development strategy for South Africa. This is very important because what is the context in which we operate? Waste, particularly municipal solid waste, is owned by municipalities. So local government have the main voice, the main force decision in the decision-making process. And however, municipalities meet or face the challenge of meeting high standards in service delivery with very limited resources. There is a lack of environmental control systems and appropriate legislation, limited know-how, often indiscriminate dumping, lack of reliable data on waste streams, on waste characteristics, and lack of reliable data on greenhouse gas emissions indicators. So global coalitions and global collaborations are fundamental to address these issues, but most importantly, enable the researchers, indeed the politicians, to understand better the nature of the waste, what they can do with the waste, and how effectively we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now, of course, all of this is coupled with poor environmental and waste awareness of the general public. So, in essence, if we are serious about reducing or stabilizing the climate from targeted actions, targeted strategy, waste management strategies, we need to understand that we need to move the environment landfill site, which dominates the disposal facilities, waste disposal facilities in South Africa, and in fact across the African continent, I must say, from a situation like this is a Durban landfill in 1996, to a situation like this, where a landfill site is fully engineered and gas is extracted, waste is diverted as much as possible, and of course leachate is also extracted. So the emissions are contained as much as possible. We also needed to strive towards finding circularity in the management of waste as a resource. So moving from a linear economy, this is from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. I'm sure many of you have or know this graph. However, for us it's fundamental because again, we are looking at elements of this circularity whereby waste, every element of the waste stream can be in fact used for producing a resource or energy or new materials or for recycling. However, and I always say, and people laugh when I say that what will probably save South Africa is indeed, with respect to this nexus waste and climate, is indeed the climate change. The reason for that is because before the advent of the Paris Agreement, in fact, before the advent of the nationally determined contribution, in a way, South Africa was not fully committed towards implementing the strategies towards the real diversion of waste from landfill sites. In fact, it's only with only in 2016 South Africa ratified the Paris Agreement. That was or is in fact a very important compass towards accomplishing many of our NDCs, and in fact also our SDGs in a way. In 2017, South Africa accounted for 1.13% of global greenhouse gas emissions, ranked 16th worldwide, with 510 million tons of CO2 equivalent produced. Now, if our electrical utility, which is Eskom, was a nation, South Africa, as you know, rely very much on electricity from fossil fuels. So if Eskom was a nation, it would be at the 35th position in the ranking of the greenhouse gas emissions nations. And I welcome comments from the audience and from the co-speakers. Now, with respect to our nationally determined contributions, how do we actually fit, how do we rank? Well, we rank currently highly insufficient, based on the upper end of the NDC range. In this context, South Africa should consider revising its target downwards for 2030 to be resubmitted to the UNFCCC as part of course, of the Paris Agreement. I'm not sure if this is happening at the moment, but we certainly advised the government towards certain modifications. I think we will go a bit faster about the emission gaps because I think other speakers have spoken about it. These are the global greenhouse gas emissions reductions for or targets set by the Paris Agreement. And then let's go back to the concept of waste. Well, we believe that organic waste can certainly contribute towards the energy crisis. In this presentation, I'm trying to shift the vision of waste as a resource towards more than waste as a problem. So we certainly believe that organic waste in South Africa will produce enough to activate renewable energy systems. For example, if we look at anaerobic digestion and biogas from organic waste, we can certainly produce in excess of 250 billion South African rand. Just for
Christina,
1 rand is
sorry,
20.
you have. Christina,
yes,
sorry,
am I going too slow? Yes.
To approach to the conclusion,
okay.
Yes, because we don't have more time.
Yes. Okay, that's fine. So So let me go just one more slide to say if we look at the size of the market. So you imagine waste to energy as a possibility for achieving emission reductions from waste. In South Africa, we have 278 municipalities and very few permitted landfills. So if all municipalities and all landfills, could be degassed, or if all municipalities could actually approach a systematic or implement decision-making in their decision-making process, systems that effectively reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, we could actually create what we call the best case scenario, and therefore the stabilization, a stabilization wedge for climate change. It's a pity that I cannot explain our decision-making tool that we are implementing in many municipalities across South Africa, called ROSE. If you want to know more about it, please write to me privately. These are some examples of biogas systems for large municipalities, also large-scale systems, as well as for rural areas. Of course, high-value products are also an option for reuse waste or recycle waste before it enters into the landfill site. This is a case of chicken feathers, for example. This is a case of peppermill sludge for the creation of green concrete. We have several research platforms for activating the green economy, evidencing the transition towards a green economy. A number of reports that the government has made available, also through international collaborations, like, for example, the Bioenergy Atlas. We won the lottery. We have a number of projects together with the National Lottery, as well as the Department of Mineral and Energies for anaerobic digestion and biogas digestion plants, decentralized systems across rural areas for the production of biogas and energy. And the last slide,
conclude,
this is
please.
Yes, this is the very last slide. This is a case of the impact that climate change has on the waste sector. This is what happens in Durban every time there is a major flood. These systems are called litter booms or litter traps, and the communities along the main river of Durban are completely flooded by a tsunami of water and plastic. The collection and treatment of this plastic is now paramount, as well as the mapping of the entry points of plastics. So I conclude. Thank you very much. This is another project that we do at national level, is the Neptune project, whereby waste can become art, just to elevate our spirits after the COVID.
Yes, sorry, but we have the time very.
That's okay. That's okay.
Okay.
No,
so
thank you. Sorry about that.
I give the floor to our last technical speakers, Mr. Karan Mangotra from the Energy and Resource Institute. Thank you, Mr. Mangotra. Sorry for your for your intervention, and thank you so much. And he in particular speak with us about the Indian policies and action for the climate emergency on the topic of energy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patricia. And let me start with stating how delighted I am to be participating in my first REMTech. I'll keep it short and take you over through India's policies on climate action. And I'll touch upon energy, but I will also go beyond it. I represent an organization, a civil society organization from India, the Energy and Resources Institute. It works around a spectrum of sustainable development and climate change related areas. Now, in the pre-COVID world, India was already a very vulnerable country. It has almost a 7,500 kilometer long coastline. Over 40 million hectares of its land mass are prone to floods or river erosion. And almost 58.6%, almost 60% of land mass is prone to earthquakes. 8 to 10% of the cultivable land is vulnerable to droughts. So these are things which are already, making the country vulnerable. It has a huge population, which now 1.2 billion, with 72% still living in rural areas and 28% in urban areas. But the per capita emissions are very, very low. They're still at around 1.2 tons of CO2 equivalent per capita, whereas some of the countries in the developed world have it around 4 or 4.5. So access to healthcare, energy, food, housing is still a challenge, and especially in rural areas, have that issue, which existed before the COVID pandemic hit us. Now, keeping all these vulnerabilities in mind, India had submitted during the Paris COP, the 2015 COP, its first set of NDCs. It had a set of 8 NDCs. 3 of them were quantified, which I have listed here. The first one was to lower its emission intensity of GDP by 33 to 35% by 2030 over 2005 levels. So that made it an economy-wide NDC. The second and the third one were very sectoral. And the second one pertained to enhancing the installed capacity of non-fossil fuel energy sources to 40% of its installed energy mix by 2030. And the third one was a forestry-based NDC. It's also a large forested piece of land that exists in India. So to create additional carbon sink of 2.5 to 3 billion tons of CO2 equivalent through additional forest and tree cover. So, these were already put in, keeping in mind, the vulnerable aspects that the country faces because of climate change. And Climate Action Tracker, my previous speaker mentioned about the South Africa case and the Climate Action Tracker. The Climate Action Tracker actually puts India's NDC to be at par with meeting the 2 or the well below 2 degree goal. Now, climate change does exacerbate India's vulnerability, and without going into too much detail, let me give you 2 examples. One is of the average rainfall over the last 7 to 10 years has remained the same across India, but the number of days over which this rainfall has fallen has reduced. So what happens is that the total amount remains the same, but floods and droughts have increased phenomenally. Whether climate change is the only reason, it's arguable, but we are seeing some of these more drier spells and more frequent and more stronger floods and tsunami related incidents. Also, we have now started to see in certain parts of the country, not in all, certain parts of the country of temperatures which are nearing to or have touched 50 degrees centigrade. So that makes water, availability of water and the water stress, a very omnipresent things. Now, couple that with COVID. The pandemic is still on, and India is still facing the brunt of it. It's already at number 2, just behind the US in terms of active cases. The nationwide lockdown, as it did in many countries, has made our systems, especially the food and the supply chain system, even more fragmented and fragile. what it has also done is that it has worsened the vulnerabilities for the already vulnerable communities of the informal labor market and the migrants. It has increased malnutrition much more, and inadequate access to healthcare, and there has been limited access to healthcare. Even till now, in some of the big cities, it's still sometimes a difficult proposition to get a bed if you are severely infected. And the inadequate health infrastructure, which was there pre-COVID, has only been intensified. And this is coming with the fact that India is already facing a lot of food wastage, and primarily because of inadequate supply chains of cold storages, lack of cooling and storage facilities in India. That has a huge impact on farmer income and has a huge impact on emissions because of the methane that emits out of the food wastage. Now, India did announce a stimulus package, much like almost all the countries now. It was a package of Indian rupees 20 trillion, which is a 265 billion USD package, then was provided in 4 tranches, starting with an availability of credit to business companies with a focus on the medium to small scale enterprises. The second one was completely around farmers and migrants who had gone back to their respective states and had almost no access to livelihood. The third one focused completely on agriculture. And the fourth tranche focused on new horizons of growth, especially through structural reforms in the 8 key sectors of the economy, which are listed here. And I'm sure you're going to share the presentations later on, right? So that is how it was. So, some of the assessments on what were the green parts of the Indian stimulus was that it had a very clear channeling of 792 million USD towards afforestation. And the intent was that it would stimulate the rural and semi-urban economy while providing the essential ecosystem benefits. It also was focused on creating very specific jobs through this fund because of the increased plantation work, forest management, wildlife protection, and the jobs that are linked to afforestation. It was again thought through in the fact that some of these jobs are done by the indigenous or the tribal communities in India. So, you were actually giving them a sustainable livelihood means also. So that was the green component of it. But, these kind of things like the pandemic also provide you with an opportunity to reset some of the things that you have been doing, and also some of the ways you have been doing things. And I have clubbed it into 5 areas. And I think the opportunity areas are around reliable and adequate water supply, reducing urban pollution, enhancing productivity and competitiveness, managing agriculture productivity and yield, managing extreme weather events. You cannot stop them from happening, but you can adapt to them, and enhancing renewable energy, where I have also clubbed in the enhancement of energy efficiency. So less energy is required. Now, within each of these opportunity areas, I have just highlighted a few that we could get into, but I would like to focus on 2. One is on the urban pollution part. It's a massive, massive problem, especially in the north part of India. And, at a time when crop burning takes place, and it's also the time when the winters are setting in. So the composition of the air is such that everything just stagnates. We have seen clear blue skies in Delhi during the lockdown, which were very similar to the times when I was growing up here. And but the thing is, how do we keep them blue? because as soon as the economy jumps back, there will be this huge rebound where it might be actually worse than when it was there. So these are some of the opportunity areas that have been thrown up because of the pandemic allowing us the opportunity to reset some of the things. But on each of these opportunity areas, India is already doing certain things, and again focusing on two, which are on managing extreme weather events and urban pollution. There is already a national clean air program that is running pretty effectively in India and goes to a subnational level and is run by cities. And then managing extreme weather events. During the pandemic, we were hit by two extremely intense and strong cyclones on either side of India. In fact, on the western side, there are very few, in fact, the city of Mumbai was facing a cyclone after 100 years, because that side, it's usually a very quiet side. But, India has started to invest in better forecasting and early warning systems that are put into place. And, that is how we are learning to adapt to these kind of things. Agriculture remains a very, very important issue. And, enhancing resilience of the traditional crop varieties and also providing credits to farmers are things that are happening in here. What do we still need? And this is my last slide. I think for me, it's three parts. One is that price, whatever we talk about, if the economics or the prices of it do not make sense to the end consumer in a developing country, it is virtually impossible for large-scale adoption. And I think innovative models do a lot of good in crossing the price hump. And we have seen that in India in the LED case, where, in 2014, the price of an LED bulb was $6. And only through aggregating demand and placing, using scale, India could reduce its prices to around 45 cents, in a span of 4.5 years. That now an LED is now almost a household item. The incandescent bulb is gone out. So, again, the move was because of the price point and not because of climate change. So I think innovative models need to come into place, and aggregation is one of them. The second point that I wanted to leave you all with is that I think now we are in a situation where neither the government, nor the private sector, nor the civil society, nor the industry, nor the academia can do any of the things alone. And, the problem has become large. The last speaker was showing, the emissions gap report gap. I have started to feel that in the 2-degree world, the 1.5 degree gap is actually now so large that I think some of it would be it's just become too large to manage. So we are in a problem that's become extremely large. And I think the need to partner and build effective coalitions becomes extremely important. And that is across geographies and economies. And lastly, using the existing multilateral development banks to look at providing low-cost finance for things which are from a developmental nature, the priority of developing countries, but have a big climate co-benefit. And that's how, the buy-in. And I'll give you an example. At this point in time, if India does get access to low-cost finance to invest in a cold storage network across the country, which is a developmental need both from a health and a food security point of view, and also has a huge climate co-benefit, has a livelihood co-benefit, it will be a phenomenal thing for India, because then it will be able to sustain once people start to see a benefit on this. So, you know, so these for me are the three key points of, you know, what. So I would want to leave on the final point is that if development is at the core and climate is a co-benefit, you would also always see an uptake in the developing countries, and especially in India. Whereas sometimes if you flip the two and it is climate at the center with a developmental co-benefit, it's not that there is no uptake, but it is a tad bit more difficult. So yeah, with that, thank you very much. And once again, you know, I'm extremely delighted to be a part of this panel. Thank you. Patricia, over to you.
Thank you, Karan. Thank you, Mr. Mangotra. Okay, now we are waiting for Vice President from Emilia-Romagna region. She assured me that she's joining with us. I think it are only few minutes. I think that we have time. Just to remember you that if you want to review the presentation and also listen again all the speakers after the end of the RAMTech week, you can you have the possibility, you are able to see and to listen all the webinar into the RAMTech platform. This is until the end of this year. And also, if some of the participants have some question for the speakers, if you don't have, or if you have in the next days, you can also write in the chat of Alfredo's Cafe, and also so you can write to the speaker directly. I see that maybe the Vice President Ellie Schlein is with us. I ask to the back office to activate and to open the video and the perfect, and the microphone. Thank you, Ms. Ellie Schlein, our Emilia-Romagna Region Vice President. This webinar have the main goal to put in the same line, in the same table, the problem and the challenge of the climate change, but also the action for the recovery fund and the recovery plan at a different level, at a municipality level, at a national level, and also at global level. So we have some experience from Milan cities, but also from South Africa, and also from India. We didn't speak what will be the effort and the action, the policies of the Emilia-Romagna region. So I ask you few minutes, because the back office is very serious, and they wanted to close our webinar because we leave the room for the next webinar. So I ask you if you can spend some word to welcome of us, and also to explain better what wanted to do the Emilia-Romagna region. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Patrizia. It's with great pleasure I say hello to all the people who have given contributions today to the discussion. You will later maybe tell me what came up by the intervention of the guests. I say hello also to Virginia, that I see connected. Hi Virginia. And very quickly, because I know that you're concluding, and I'm sorry if I was late, but it's a complicated day because we just had an election in Italy, as you know, in 7 important regions. Well, we are trying to push the government to build this new framework for the recovery plan for the country, to build it in a shared way together with the territories, starting from the regions, but not only, also with the municipalities, for example, and involving also enterprises, trade unions, civil society organization, because it's very important to imagine together how to rebuild in another way the country. The Commission was brave in setting 3 main priorities in the Recovery Fund, which are the ecological transition, the digital transformation, and also social cohesion. These are three very crucial priorities that we also find in the framework of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And it's also, they are also issues on which we see a new, let's say, there are people mobilizing, especially young people all around Europe and all around our country, exactly on these three main issues: the fight to inequalities and the ecological transition, because we know very well that inequalities and climate are very well connected. And we have to try to reshape our policies at all level, national, European, but also regional and local level, to try to be coherent with such a big operation of reconstruction of, in this case, Italy and the European Union. But I also say hello to the friends who are in India and in other places, because these are main challenges that regard the whole world. So not only our region or our country. So what are we trying to do? We are trying to rebuild together with the subject that I just mentioned. For example, we're trying to write a new pact for good jobs and climate, trying to integrate exactly the objectives of decarbonizing Emilia-Romagna within 2050, but also to reach 100% renewable energies within 2035. And at the same time, trying to rebuild by creating good jobs in the green economy, for example, by investing a lot on sustainable mobility, or also on energy efficiency, for example. There are new opportunities also because of the choices that the government at the Italian level is taking in energy efficiency, which are extremely interesting on how to keep together the two issues, good jobs and the ecological transition. We have to work on a number of problems and contradictions that we still have, especially when we talk about infrastructure, but we're trying to go in a new way. For example, by making the transport for young people within 14 years old free for them. The public transport will be free for them starting from this year, but next year we will try to make it possible also for people until 19 years old. So we are trying to, let's say, accompany the conversion, the ecological conversion of the economy with concrete measures. At the same time, on the social, and I will conclude on this, on the social and the new welfare, we have to learn a lesson from what happened with COVID-19. For example, on how to build strong healthcare at the territorial level, for example, by strengthening the assistance in the home of the people, because it was very effective when we started to try to cure people at home for the COVID-19 pathology. So we can learn something and try to strengthen and integrate better our health policies, our social policies, because the more we can anticipate a social need and work on a social need, the more we can prevent the fact that it might become a health situation, a health problem. So it's all about prevention, both on healthcare and also on how to work on our territory, trying to address the effects of climate change. So also on that side, we can do a lot with this recovery fund investment, but we have to be quick to be able to project new projects that can actually keep together the social and the environmental side. And we have to also try to make it together with all the actors of society, because it cannot be only a political discussion. We wouldn't make it. So thanks a lot for your attention, for your contribution. Patrizia will let me know of the good ideas that came up, and good luck to us all for the future.
Thank you so much, really, Ellie. And also thank you so much to all the panelists and all the participants for this interesting webinar. And also, if you want to write directly to the, or to make a question to the speakers, you can write in the Alfredo's Cafe chat room, or also in directly way. Thank you so much, and sorry for the back office organization for our just a little delay. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.